Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Atomy Brainwaves, our podcast on education for educators. Brainwaves is produced by our wonderful team here at Atomy. What is Atomy? It's an online teaching and learning platform for secondary education. We provide engaging, curriculum-specific video and text lessons for over 190 subjects, as well as matching quizzes and exam practice that can be used for both learning and formative assessment. We also provide powerful analytics that can help teachers diagnose how their students are progressing and zero in on who might need a little bit of extra help. Our goal is to help make life easier for our teachers, give them more time to work on the most important things, and ultimately help to generate better outcomes. If you want to find out more about Atomy, head over to our main site at getatomy.com and feel free to try it out for free. Today, I was joined by Principal of St. Phillips Christian College, Cessnock, Darren Cox. He spoke about his journey of leading a rapidly growing school, the challenges and strategies for managing culture and well-being for students and teachers alike in a growing school, and shared his expectations for what lessons might be taken in terms of online learning for schools finding their new normal. If that sounds good to you, feel free to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you do your podcast listening, and we'll always be happy to take a quick 5-star rating. In the meantime, have a listen to this and enjoy.
Are you going to teach us anything?
What, you want me to teach you something? You want to learn something? All right. You got it!
Hey everybody, welcome back to Atomy Brainwaves. I'm your host Simon, and today I'm joined by our very special guest, Darren Cox, Principal of the rapidly expanding St. Phillips Christian College, Cessnock, named in the top 5 for Principal of the Year with the AIS in 2019, and regular keynote speaker at a host of educational conferences in Australia. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Simon. Really appreciate you guys having me on the show tonight.
Yeah, really good to have you. And as you were telling me off air right before we started, you're a bit of a podcast expert at this point. This is your 6th in recent weeks.
I don't know if 6 makes me an expert, Simon, but there has been a few in the last month. Yes.
Well, in my eyes, it makes you more than an expert. You're an absolute master of the format at this point. Expecting nothing but incredibly concise and insightful answers from here on out.
Well, once we get into conversation, I find that aspect really easy. It's the technology setting it up, as you've just experienced with me. It does take a little bit of time to talk me through because everyone has their own style and their own different programs and softwares. But once we're talking, then I'm good to go.
All right. Well, don't sell yourself short. I think you did pretty good on the technological front, but fair enough. Education is your area of expertise, I suppose, and that's what we'll focus on. And I guess our central topic for the day will probably take a slant towards well-being in schools, something I know you've kind of presented on in the past and kind of have a lot of wisdom to offer on. But before we get there, what we're going to start with is just by getting a run-through of your journey in education to date, where you started, the various turns along the road that have led you to where you are now.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if I'm an expert in well-being as so much just sharing my experience, and I just think that there's some just power in stories and people just pick up little bits along the way. So where did it start for me? It started in Western Sydney in 1993, out working with some students who learning probably wasn't their number one priority, and it was really around that sense of character development. And I think that's probably where my heart for well-being for young people really started there. And so I spent a number of years in Western Sydney, and from there worked for the Behaviour Modification Unit, helping kids with behaviourally challenged behaviours at schools, and from there into sort of inner West Sydney, and then actually over in London for a couple of years, where I cut my teeth in areas such as Brixton and the like back in the mid-90s. Before heading back to Australia, and one thing led to another, and I found myself in some school leadership positions, and then I heard about a school up in Cessnock that was only a tiny school at the time, just under 200 students, and the town was growing, it was expanding, but educationally probably just needed some work there, and so found myself fortunate enough to become the deputy principal in 2010 at the school. It was only 200 students in rented demountable buildings. And here we are 10, 11 years later, and we're now 1,100 students, and we've got an early learning centre, and we started up a special school. And we were fortunate enough to purchase 103 acres of land. It was just a paddock, a swamp actually. And so 8 years ago, we've started building a school from scratch. So that's been really quite an exciting journey. And the school has grown from humble beginnings to now being somewhat a school of choice in the region, and attracting quality staff from all over Australia. And student results are improving. And we've been fortunate enough to be recognised nationally with some of the student results and some of the teaching practices that are happening. And yeah, we're very fortunate to be on this journey to see large numbers of students improving in who they are and how they are and what they're achieving. And other schools are choosing to come and visit and just, engage with us in that story. So it's been a really a big ride, to be honest.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. And I that's quite a fascinating journey, particularly in relation to, I guess, the recent history of St. Phillips in Cessnock. And I just want to kind of ask you quickly about that, because I guess, we've had guests on before who've been in leadership positions for a long time, but at sort of I guess, established schools. And we've talked a little bit about the challenges of that they've faced going into a position where, you're taking over of what's already quite a big ship, so to speak, and the job really is quite a lot of it is just kind of maintenance almost to a certain extent of what's already there. Whereas it sounds like your challenge coming into leadership in your school was a totally different story, where it's about constant kind of building and growth. And I was wondering if you could just kind of talk to us a little bit about what's kind of involved in that, what that's like, the challenges involved in building a school, as you say, almost sort of from scratch to its very impressive position today.
Yeah, thanks. It's really around culture, right? Because the school has grown, but we haven't just grown by 900. We've actually grown by a lot more than that. But students sort of come and go along that journey. When I first arrived there, we had 14 staff, and we now have 146 staff. Wow. And so establishing school is really around establishing culture, and it's around, I suppose the leadership qualities that it takes to lead people through change management, because every year there is change. Every single year, because we're adding a grade. We go from 2 classes in a grade to 3. We go from 4 to 5. We add new subjects. We've built a new facility, so people have to change and move. And so every single year, change is the absolute constant. And so I'm well aware there are a lot of schools where even if a staff member has to change their desk for 1 year, that can be quite tumultuous. Whereas in our school, it's really around how we lead people through a change process. So there's quite a lot of, obviously, communication involved in that, casting a vision, getting some buy-in from stakeholders, hearing them on that journey, and what we can do to allay fears and to support them through that change. And then also just creating a picture of a better future, right? I think we're all compelled to be part of something that is making a significant difference. And we get the journey to really shape culture in that space. This is we're the first independent school in the region. And so it's even just around educating students and families around that sort of that choice of, you're not just going to the local school because you have to, but you're choosing to be a part of us. And this is who we are, and this is how we do things. And likewise, staff, we attract a very, very young staff. Sometimes feel as I'm running more of a frat party sometimes than a staff meeting, but there's a lot of excitement that comes with that. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of teachability with that. But, at the same time, comes some inexperience around rigor and having some different techniques and different strategies. And so it's around a lot of developing staff to help them become the best of who they are. And we've been really fortunate to see young staff just grow into being excellent educators. And we've seen young staff get given promotional opportunities both within our own school and into other schools. And we take that role really seriously around nurturing young staff through the beginning years of their teaching. We know that here in Australia, there's some shocking statistics around young teachers and how long they stay in the profession. And we have not seen anything like that at our school. Our young staff have just been fantastic to work with. And what's been really exciting for me in the last 3-4 years is, as our school has grown in reputation, We're actually now attracting some experienced staff to really complement it. And so we're getting a really good balance through the school now of staff. And it's just around culture, and we speak into things. And so we do a lot of training on conversation skills and how to hold crucial conversations, and establishing a coaching culture in the school, and looking at our strengths. I'm really big on trying to have people operating in their strengths. And so there's a lot of schools where there's things that we just put up with them because that's the way it's always been, or we tolerate something because that's the way it's always been. Whereas when you're establishing a school, you actually get to speak into that, and you just got to be relentless in that pursuit of actually establishing the school and the culture as to what we want it to be, and we will champion it when we're seeing it in action, and we'll call it when it's not where we want it to be. So it is an exciting journey. It can be tiring at times, but you see some really good fruits for your labour.
Yeah, exciting, tiring, but very rewarding by the sounds of things. It's almost, what's kind of occurring to me listening to you there is that it kind of, the way you're describing it could almost be as if it calls to mind someone maybe describing like a startup business or something with regards to the culture, and that have the fast pace and the kind of turnover, which is just a natural part of that. Something, we of course would have known about here at Atomy, but it's just funny for me to hear, because it's not really a kind of adjectives or descriptions you would normally associate with schools. But I guess it just goes to show that, these things are transferable across the board in different areas, and can be as positive in the education sphere as they can in other spaces.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, the role of principal has changed over the years and continues to evolve and change. And am I responsible for educational directions? 100%. But I'm also an organisational leader. So I need to bring some sense of how do we lead an organisation to be the most thriving, successful version of itself. And therefore, it's every individual doing their role to the best they can and working that through. But there's been a lot to learn on the journey, a lot of HR processes to learn and to manage and to change, and the processes that you had when you were 250 are not the processes at 500, which aren't the processes at 1,000. So our staff have been really adept at handling different changes to reporting techniques and marking techniques, and the whole lot just is been constantly evolving. And we're now, I would suggest, as an organisation, at that sort of almost that gangly teenager type of time where we've come through our infancy. We're now in that working really out who we want to be, how we want to keep doing things, to move into that next phase of maturity. So it's, every organisation has its stages and its seasons, and that's been no different for leading an educational school context as well.
Yeah, well, I have to say it bodes very well for your future if you consider yourself to be the gangly, awkward teenager at this point with the success you've achieved. Let me tell you, I definitely wouldn't have considered myself as comparatively successful in my gangly, awkward teenage phase, but there you go, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
What's, one thing I'm kind of hearing a lot coming through with this is the importance of culture to all of this, and how within, you talk about change as the constant, having a good culture and having everybody on board with that within the school is really important. And I suppose that sort of ties in a way quite neatly to what we're going to talk about next in terms of well-being, because in a way those two things are quite almost synonymous in one respect with each other. I just wanted to kind of quickly ask, why is well-being so important in the classroom? First of all, it almost seems like an obvious question in a way, but it does, I think, need to be discussed. And I guess, the follow part there, why does it need to be discussed? Perhaps the lack of attention that the subject of culture and well-being has received in the past. Why is it something that, in not just in smaller schools that are constantly growing, but even in bigger, more established schools, is it something that we need to be giving more attention to now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's something we need to give more attention to now, as we're just more aware of. I think the interesting journey for teachers is that sometimes I think we potentially lose our way along the educational journey. Like, I know that for myself, and when I talk to staff at school, most of us, if not almost all of us, went into teaching not because of our love of outcomes And not because of our love of wanting to write reams of paperwork called a program, but we went in because there was a person in our life who believed in us when we were a young person, who accepted us, who challenged us, who set us high expectations, who instilled in us a passion for life and for who we could become. And we went into teaching because of a teacher. And I would suggest that you survey 100 people, you're going to get a very, very high response that all of us could remember a teacher that made a difference in our life. And one of the things that we've done at school on a couple of occasions is actually share with the person next to you who that teacher was and why was that? What was it about that person that made a difference? Because at the end of the day, that's why most of us went into teaching, because of that teacher. So we now get the opportunity to be that person to another young person, and we don't know who it's going to be. And so, you're in a primary context, you have the same sort of 25, 30 every day. And if you're in a high school context, you're going to have however many classes of about 25 or 30. And you get the opportunity, and you just don't know which young person is observing, who needs that word of encouragement, who needs that smile, who needs that acceptance, that challenge, etc. And you don't know who that's going to be. And that for me is far more important, that we unlock that in a young person's life than we do an understanding of outcome 1A. Because I sit here now as a 48-year-old and I cannot remember any of the outcomes. The only lessons that you really look back on and remember are ones that went really badly, or they were unique, or something funny happened. Like they're the actual lessons you remember. You don't remember too many of your assessment tasks, but gosh, you can remember the teachers. You can remember the teacher who was like this or like this or like this, and so you remember the people. And I think one of the this world at the moment, as we sort of, trying to recover from COVID lockdowns and whatnot, what became apparent was not that students and staff actually were missing, connecting with outcomes. Actually, what they were missing was connection with people.
With each other,
As students walk back through the school gate on day 1 and day 2, they've got these big smiles on their face. Why? Because they get to see their friends again. They get to see their teachers again. And there's something very unique about being in the presence of someone else. And we're relational people. We're human beings, and we like to be with other humans. And that's got to be the heart that drives everything. It's actually got to be a heart of I don't know, who we are and what we instill in young people as opposed to what we do. And I think that it's easy to put our eyes on wellbeing programs, and we say, okay, well, we're looking for the magic bullet. We do this program, and we do this program, and we do this program at this grade and this program at that grade. And we sometimes in there miss actually it's about the relationship. How do we actually connect with young people? When we walk through a school, do we notice them? Do we look at them? Do we smile at them? Do we say good morning to them? Do we encourage them? Do we notice they've had their hair done? Like, they're the things that as people we actually just want to be noticed. And young people are no different. When a teacher can engage and know their name and recognise something about them, ask a question even about how they went on the weekend at their dance or their sporting, or they're the things that students feel then, wow, there's an adult who knows me, and there's an adult who cares for me, and there's an adult who wants good things for me. And though that's extremely important. And then...
carry on.
And then in there, it's actually then believing good things for them and challenge them and giving something to aspire to and something to hope for and something to aim for. And actually then there's an adult who not only knows them but believes in them for good things. That makes a big difference, even just creating this sense of a happy school. So one of the first buildings I had the opportunity to build, we actually built it with a slide inside. So if you go on our website, you'll see pictures. There's this big bright yellow enclosed slide that goes up from the first floor down to the ground floor. Now that is not going to improve any results, but what it does is it says this is a fun, happy, engaging place where we love life and we love people, and it sends you those messages subliminally, and every parent walks in and goes, oh wow, school wasn't like this when I was at school, and it now makes it a place that you want to be. And so I think sometimes as educators we can get so serious and so hell-bent on every single dot point, which are important, but if we don't have that depth of relationship where we actually love the young people that we lead and we can enjoy life with them, I think we're not going to necessarily get the best engagement out of them when it does come to delivering those outcomes.
Yeah, very, very fair points. Also, I have to say, I hope that this isn't the case with any students in your school, but were I a student in a school with a slide, I just know I would have abused that. I've spent far too much time just going running up and down on that slide. So hopefully nobody. Are there any students who are that
so
way
one of the things that you and I have not had the chance to meet is that when you see me live and get to engage me, you will know that I was the mischievous boy at class.
Okay.
And so I often joke with certain students that I must have just done work experience most days sitting outside the deputy's and principal's office, because that's actually just how I learnt to do what the job was. So
through osmosis, that's how you picked it up. All those kind of conversations through the closed doors and whatnot.
So even a school having a principal actually just enjoys life that way and wants kids to enjoy life and doesn't want everyone to conform. And schools, the tension for schools is they're fairly much based on a lot of conformity, right? Wear the same uniform, line up at the room, behave this way, submit your work this way. There's a lot of conformity and uniformity that goes on in a school. So therefore, how do you allow a young person to express who they are, and how is that celebrated, knowing that it may not be where all the compliant A-grade students sitting in the front middle of every single class. And that's a journey for school. So if you can find a way of appreciating every person as a unique individual with unique offerings, that goes a long way to creating a culture that is one of well-being.
Yeah, and I guess just to follow up on that and kind of tie it into, I suppose, our parallel theme of a growing school and the challenges involved therein. The relational aspect you talk about there is obviously so key, so important, something that's only been highlighted at a time like this. I wanted to ask, does it, you talked about change being the constant and growing all the time, and also faces coming in and coming out in terms of teachers and obviously students, so, that's the nature of it. Does that pose an extra challenge for having that relational aspect? If there's that much growth all the time, can that does that to any extent erode that kind of personal relationship between teacher and student? And if so, what can be done within the classroom and also from a leadership down perspective to kind of, even while things are changing and growing, to protect that core value of face-to-face personal connection and relationship?
Yes, I would suggest that the main driver of growth in our school has been the fact that young people have just loved the culture that exists. They're then telling their siblings, they're telling their neighbours, they're telling their friends from other schools, hey, it's really different at this place. You got to come to this school. It's so different. And so there's obviously, and time again, we hear from families and from students, it's just so different here and it feels different. And we know that atmosphere, as human beings, we know that atmosphere plays a big difference in how we feel in different contexts. And so if we can create that sense of atmosphere through positivity, through generosity, through hospitality, through talking positively and engaging with young people, that they're marketing the school, they're telling people about the school. So when we do a lot of PD with our staff, it is around trying to find that really good balance between, you're not their friend, and don't mistake talking about relationship to being their friend. That's not the relationship. The relationship is one of teacher-student, and I think, way back when historically, people would follow different philosophers, they'd follow different teachers because of their way of being, not necessarily so much because of the way they delivered lessons on astronomy or whatever, right? They actually wanted to follow in that person's way of being. So therefore, you come to St. Phillips and this is our way of being, and we would encourage you to be that way. And when they see and experience the positivity of that themselves, they go, yeah, this does make a difference in our life. And so many times, I think the most positive thing I hear from parents is, I feel like I've got my young person back again. I've got, a young person who's developed this confidence and this self-assurance. And for me, that is absolute key, because whether they go on to be an accountant, a teacher, a hairdresser, I don't mind. I want them to be successful, but gosh, I want them to be really confident young people in who they are, and that's a big aspect of it. So that part of the culture exists well and truly. What do we do in that? We've done some different things over the years. We have pastoral care, tutor groups, homerooms, whichever people call them. So we keep those numbers quite small, somewhere between 12 and 14. They meet every day. We try, we're not great at it yet, we're still working it through. We try not to make it just a purely admin time about have you handed this in and are you wearing this, but actually that's a time to connect with young people. We've tried different programs, we put different leadership structures in place. So the whole time it's been trying to be ahead of the curve to ensure that no one gets left behind, so to speak, and that people come because they feel a sense of connection, they feel as though they belong. So it's really important to me that everyone in the school community feels that way.
Hey folks, hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we've got plenty more to come after this quick break. Here at Atomy Brainwaves, we're all about education, and not just for students, for ourselves too. We would love to hear from you, whether that's feedback on one of our episodes or a question you'd like to see answered by one of our guests or by Sue. So, if you've got a comment or a question, don't hesitate to email us at brainwaves@getatomy.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, let's get back to it. Yeah, amazing. It sounds like some really good strategies there with regards to creating that positive culture. A couple of other things just I wanted to ask with the focus on the student for the moment. One aspect is, something that for all of the positivity and for all of the, of course, absolute importance of the teacher-student dynamic, and that being a healthy one where there is, to a degree, that personal element. One thing that you'll always hear brought up and always talked about is, I guess, the tension between that aspect, the personal element versus authority, and the need for the teacher to have a degree of authority in the classroom. Now, I know you touched on that a little bit earlier on in your answer, but I wanted to kind of, I guess, explore that a little more. How do you complete that circle, so to speak? What is it that teachers can do to make sure they find that right balance between giving enough rope to the students so that there is that personal relationship and that positive culture, but not so much that there might be the odd student who ends up taking advantage of that and undermining the teacher's control in the classroom?
Yeah, there's something really unique in trying to find that happy medium, isn't there, right? So one of the analogies that I use, it's a very loose analogy, but I'll share it with you, Simon, is that...
Fire away.
That essentially, we all enjoy going to the beach, right? We go to the beach. It's relaxing, it's safe, we feel good. Walking on the sand, it evokes really positive, happy thoughts and a good way of being, and we feel so much better when we're at the beach, right? You lived out here in Australia, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
I certainly do. Can't compare with it in an Irish context, because our
but everyone
beaches
knows,
are not all that impressive.
Because when they go on holiday, most people want to go to a beach somewhere, right? But all of us have a healthy respect for the ocean. We swim between the flags. You don't turn your back on the waves. It's not that we're scared of the ocean, but we just have a healthy respect for the ocean, that we want to be there, we want to engage with it, but we have a healthy respect because we know that at the end of the day, it's sort of probably more in control and more powerful than us in that sort of context. So for me, that's how, as teachers, as leaders, that should be our way. Actually, students want to be in our class. It evokes a positive frame of mind for them. They want to engage in that class. But at the end of the day, there's this level of healthy respect for the person who is actually in charge, either leading the school or leading that classroom. And that's the balance that you're looking for in your way of being. You're not their best mate because you're not playing Xbox with them, and you're not friends with them on Snapchat. So it's not that relationship. So how do I establish my way of being that they enjoy my presence, they feel safe, they feel joyful, but there's this level of healthy respect for me as the leader, as the teacher authority in that room. So and then we do professional learning around that, how you present yourself, how you talk, what your expectations are, do you stay firm to your expectations, all of those types of things, how you encourage, how you inspire, also how you correct makes a big difference. And I mentioned earlier that we're a strengths-based school. Well, in a strengths-based school, there's some really simple practical outworkings of that, right? So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Clifton's strengths at all, but there's this list of 34 strengths that they would suggest that we all possess. So for myself, my number one strength is one that is called woo, which is basically I walk into a room of 100 people I've never met before, and that's just like a winter wonderland for me. It's a playground. Awesome. There's 100 new people I get to meet with right now. Or you walk into a party, and we know there are some people when they go to a social gathering, they will have 1 and 2 really deep conversations. And then there's people like me who spends about 5 minutes with everybody in the room. I get in the car with my wife at the end of the night. She talks about the 2 people she spoke to and, wow, did you know they've got this? And I said, no, but did you touch base with that person and did you talk to that person? And it's a different frame of mind, right? So if you've got 2 of me in the class, what will often happen is that the teacher will say to, okay, we're going to go and do some group work now. And let's just say it's Simon and Darren are the 2 sort of loud out there ones in the room. And Darren and Simon, you can't be in a group together. Well, I now hear that and I go, hang on. You're telling me I can't work with my friend? I haven't even done anything wrong. Now it's like I'm in trouble because I can't work with my friend. Well, now I'm going to make it a little bit of trouble for you and I'm going to go to my way just to be a bit irritating and whatever else it be. If, though, the teacher frames that set differently, we're going to go into group work now. Simon, could you go and work with the guys over in that group over there? Because they're going to really need your communication at the end when they have to present their learning, because that's really going to help them enormously. And Darren, could you go and work with the group down there in the front right-hand corner? Because they're going to need your creative ideas and the way that you're always just thinking about new things and new ways, and that's going to help them generate some ideas for what you need to do. Now I'm walking off to that group with a sense of swagger that group needs me. I've got something to offer and I get to be in that group to contribute rather than Darren and Simon, you can't work with each other. So you're getting the same outcome. You're getting Darren and Simon to work with 2 different groups, but you're getting it done very differently. And too often in class, we don't draw on students' strengths in a way that actually sets them up for success, sets the class up for success, etc., etc. And so teachers really need to think about how do I get the best out of every individual in that room, and how do I set them up for success in that way? So, and that's a really small practical example of how we can do that in a class setting.
Yeah, it's a really elegant solution to the issue as it's presented, and kind of a really a smart way to go about navigating that kind of, I guess, dynamic within the classroom, that internal factor. But I guess the next thing I was going to ask you is, of course, there are the internal factors, which is the teacher-student relationship I suppose it's almost easier for the teacher to control. But at the end of the day, there are external variables too that are going to play into, student well-being, and then have that knock-on effect for the whole culture of the classroom, whatever's going on at home with students, or how they're interacting with other students, maybe even how they're interacting with other teachers within the school. And I wanted to ask, from a teacher perspective, what can they do to manage those? I know it's always going to be a limited, particularly in relation to home, it's always going to be a very limited degree to which teachers can impact that. But to what extent can they, if there are challenges being faced by students externally from the classroom, once they're inside the classroom, what can teachers do to still keep it positive, both for the individual student themselves who might be facing a particular challenge, but also for the group and kind of, I guess, minimizing any knock-on effects that might have for the culture of the entire class as a whole?
That's good. So, and we certainly experience that, right, with different backgrounds that students are coming from and then what they bring into the classroom in that setting. I think that one of the things there that I think is that there's some things in life that we just, for some reason, we're happy to really explicitly teach. And then there are other things that we just sort of hope people are going to develop along the way, pick it up by osmosis or whatever it be. And I think that social skills is something that we don't explicitly teach enough, right? So when a student, displays some extroverted characteristics in the classroom, that would suggest that that's probably a little bit the way they're wired. We don't want to change who they are. We just need to shape who they are. Because actually your enthusiasm and your willingness to share ideas and your willingness to speak in loud, gosh, you could really use that very well in so many different settings. In this context, that's being a little bit socially inappropriate. and actually use it to educate kids, right? So when we first went to online learning and what happened is that a number of different students from my school, I'm in a group of schools based sort of around the Hunter Central Coast area of New South Wales. And a couple of my students somehow found themselves in Zoom meetings at other schools with their leadership team, right? So a principal from another school with their senior leaders and a couple of my kids log in, right? Well, I'm not going to go mad at them. They're just pushing the boundaries. They're seeing how far they can go. They're seeing what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's funny, what's not funny. Let's educate them through that, all right? Because there's a whole lot of actual sort of some cool personal stuff that goes into that. It doesn't mean that the kid's naughty and he's got no hope. It just means he's pushing the boundaries and seeing what's there. So if we use every interaction and every opportunity as a teaching moment for young people to teach them how to be the best versions of themselves, then that makes a big difference. And just trying to make real world links for kids, right? Like we see so many schools where behaviours and attitudes that are exhibited at school are not exhibited anywhere else in society by them. Like they wouldn't go into McDonald's and scream at the person behind the counter because they asked them to stand in somewhere different, right? We don't see kids carrying on like that on a plane or anywhere else or in a restaurant. But for some reason, they think they can speak back in certain ways in class or they can carry on in a certain way to other students. So actually, we're educating them to become citizens, and that's not acceptable in society. And we're a part of society, and so therefore this is how we be. And so I think that as teachers, it's tiring and it's exhausting. That's why we need those regular breaks of non-term times, right? So that we can actually have a little bit of an emotional decompress moment. And so we just need to educate young people through it rather than just looking to ping them on rules all the time. I think the other thing that happens, and I'm a big advocate of this and my staff will back me up on this, is that so many times we talk about the discipline process in the school, but we don't talk about a commendation system in the school. Student meets an expectation, student exceeds an expectation, and yes, so they should, right? That's the expectations of the school. Student doesn't meet an expectation, we call them on it. What if we flip that on its head? And what if we started saying to the 95% of kids in our classes, gee, I love the way you guys have been interacting with your learning today, the way you've engaged with that, the way you work collaboratively, the way you responded to each other, saying, gosh, that's an exciting, encouraging classroom to be. And if we started speaking that sort of life and positivity into our students and recognizing that that's what we value most, rather than always looking to put the kid in the naughty corner, you wonder if that's also going to make a bit of a difference, whereas teachers tend to, by default, for whatever reason it be, find it much easier to talk about the punishments and the consequences than it is the commendations and the positives. But that's a bit of a hobby horse of mine at school.
Well, it's some really good examples of what teachers can do. As you say, you are always going to get teachers who do focus on, I guess, the more disciplinary sides of things, but it sounds like in your school there's much more of a culture of that positive
and the transfer of that is that, if we talk about teacher well-being, well, what do you hear? They don't even, you'll hear when a teacher wants to be negative, because they're not even being recognised by the leaders. They don't even recognise that I did this and this. Well, that's intriguing that you now want to be recognised for something you get paid a lot of money to do, and you want to be recognised. So how much more do you reckon the 14-year-old wants to be recognised for what they've done? And it's an interesting parallel between teachers and what they want for their well-being and to be recognised and appreciated, and they want that spoken out. They don't want me to talk to them if they turn up 2 minutes late to work. They turn up 2 minutes late to work, I'm expected as the leader to be understanding of traffic, and I'm expected to be understanding of someone grabbed them in the car park. If a student turns up 2 minutes late to class, now we're holding them accountable. I just find it intriguing how teachers want their well-being because they want the good things recognised and they want the other things left alone. But when it comes to them leading as a teacher leader in their own classes, they completely do that the other way around. So that's an interesting phenomena in education as well.
Well, it really is. And I suppose it's about, from a teacher perspective, getting over that dissonance between, seeing the student as, I guess, relating on a human level versus just purely the professional level, because thinking as you've pointed out there, but I suppose how that transfers itself into actionable change for teachers is, I guess, putting themselves in the student's shoes and thinking about, well, what if it were me in that scenario? How would I like to be treated? How would I like to be spoken to if I've turned up 2 minutes late or whatever. So I suppose taking that approach as I guess just even a first step jumping off point with regards to that of being like, how would I like to be spoken to in this situation?
Yeah, so and that's where I encourage my staff to see themselves as leaders. They get the opportunity to lead a group of 30 young people. In that lesson, they get an opportunity to lead another group of 30. And so as a leader, bring vision, bring aspiration, bring hope, bring encouragement, bring positivity, and bring accountability. If we operate as leaders in each of our spheres within the school, we're bringing those character traits into those situations, and good leadership we know can inspire and motivate and bring about positive change.
Well, I guess that also ties in quite neatly to what I wanted to ask you next, because of course we don't want, the last thing we want is for issues over teacher well-being to translate themselves into negative interactions with students. But of course the other side of this then is, well, how does that get prevented? And so what I'm coming at with that is, for teachers, it's obviously it's a really difficult job, and particularly if you're trying extra hard to keep things as kind of positive and within the context, as you say yourself, of a young school that's growing, where there's so much change happening. That's an extra load of challenges, and that can pose its own difficulties for teacher well-being, which, when you are that authority figure, that leader in the classroom, it can be much harder to manage that, or a different challenge rather, managing that authority. As and managing your own well-being. So I guess wanted to ask, first of all, what can teachers themselves do within the classroom to protect their own well-being? And also, I guess the second part of it would be for people such as yourself, the school leaders, to what extent does the responsibility fall on you, and what can you do in that situation?
Yeah, spot on, right? So it's a really important thing. So a number of the conferences I talk at around teacher development and teaching and learning and things like that, and as leaders it can become quite easy to go and do a lesson observation and make an observation and a comment on a teacher and the lesson that we saw. But oftentimes in schools we probably don't reflect on ourselves as leaders enough to think about, how have I now created the conditions to set these teachers up for success? Have I given them the supports? Have I given them clear leadership guidelines? Have I given them the resources that they need, et cetera, et cetera? Have I equipped them with a good team around them? Like, as a school leader and as leaders in the school, what are we doing to create the conditions for our teachers to succeed and thrive? And we can't really talk to our teachers if we're not really looking in the mirror and having that approach. And so as a school, we take teacher wellbeing extremely seriously. And so there's a lot of different elements that we bring into that space. And the hope for myself would be is that, being taught as a young guy, blessed to be a blessing. So I'm going to receive that, and whatever I receive, then I can give to others. And so as the teachers are receiving good things and a sense of well-being, then they're in a good position to be able to give that away as well. So we do a lot in there. So a number of the things that I try to do is I try to equip them to how they can be the best versions of themselves. How can I actually equip them that not every professional learning needs to be around outcome 1A, but actually it can be around how you can succeed and thrive as a person, as an individual, so that then you're feeling positive and optimistic, which you can also bring into that space. So we've done lots of training. Everyone's been trained in coaching techniques so they can have sort of more coaching conversations with each other as a means of supportive dialogue. All of our staff have been put through the Clifton Strengths, and then they've met with a strengths consultant on a few occasions as to how they can actually understand themselves better and then understand the people around them better, and the feedback on that has been enormously positive. We do a training called Crucial Conversations. We put large numbers of staff through Crucial Conversations so they can hold those conversations more successfully, for want of a better phrase. So there's a number of things that we do in that context. We give them, quite a bit of teacher voice as to what they'd like their load to be, who would they like to work with, what would that success look like in that space. As a leader, what else are we doing? I provide journals for all of our staff. Every year I'm giving them different gifts, right? Actually, to try and equip them for their well-being. At school, we built a state-of-the-art gym. and as a means of addressing well-being in the school, a proactive approach that every student and staff member gets to use in the school. So it's timetabled for the students. So they have 2 or 3 fitness sessions a week as a positive, proactive way of dealing with well-being. And for our staff, they get a free gym membership for them and their spouse and their family, because if we are physically, and I do a lot of talks around a lot of places on the importance of physical fitness that is often overrated. We think about gratitude journals, we think about all these emotional, spiritual, social things we can do, but sometimes the physical is negated. So there's a large number of things, from morning teas and coffee vouchers to, we're based in the winery region up here in the Hunter Valley, and so I'm able to gift staff with different wines because we have some memberships around the place. And it's just little things like that to let them know that we see them, we value them. Can we keep their loads as low and as reasonable as humanly possible? Can we give them a bit of a flexible arrangement for coming a bit later or leaving a bit earlier from time? So it's around creating the conditions that just lets them know that, once again, I'm aware of the work they're putting in. They're seen, they're valued. I'm equipping them as much as we possibly can. And well-being, there's definitely a culture of well-being that exists in a school, and that's when you are creating the conditions for people to be well, right? Which is what well-being is. You flip that, it's actually about being well. So how can I help people be well? I can't take away your workload. You still got to write a program. You still got to teach it. You still got to mark it. You still got to give feedback. I can't change that, but gosh, I can change the atmosphere and the conditions in which you need to operate to do that.
Yeah, and you say it's little things, but the little things add up, and the more of these, initiatives that surround, I guess, the central work, the more that changes the environment. And it's clear what's come across that it's something you've thought about quite broadly in terms of what can be done. I wanted to...
Even from a school leader's perspective, like knowing your staff, like knowing every person's name and knowing their spouse and knowing things about them, right? There's so many school leaders that just, I would suggest in a larger staff, don't even know who all their staff are, right? So there's just lots of little things that you can do. And do you go out of your way to go and engage in a staff room and hear people and talk to people? I run different, once a term I'll run a lunch where people get to come and talk to me about any topic that they want, and staff will turn up, or there's one that I'm hearing some things about. We'll just go and have a Q&A time. It's about giving them that space. I include different staff on some of our what am I looking for? When we're employing staff, right? The panel. I include staff on this. They get a staff voice into that space. There's a number of different things that you can do. And interesting enough, the staff that have joined us in the last 3 or 4 years have made incredibly positive comments and feedback on where they're at, and we've done different surveys, and they're really positive on how people feel about coming to work every single day, which is encouraging.
Yeah, that sounds really encouraging. One thing I wanted to ask you quickly is, because obviously it's something that's very relevant to us here at Atomi, but to what extent can online resources play a role within, I guess, the culture of the school? Now, it might be a bit of a stretch to say that it is, in and of itself setting the scene for an environment of well-being, but might it be fair to say that the use of online resources, or have you found that the use of online resources can be something which in its own way can help lighten the workload to an extent, or help teachers add value within their work in certain ways? And do you find that could in its own way bleed into the wider culture of the school in a similar fashion to some of the initiatives you talked about, such as the gym or all of the various examples? Do you find that it can have a similar effect in its own right?
Yeah, 100%. It's about creating efficiencies, right? It's a busy job there, and there's more compliance, there's more paperwork, there's more administration than ever before in teaching, and I would take a lot of that away if I can. So what do? We minimize it where we can, and the best use of technology in any of our world is when it creates efficiencies. And so if we can do that through programs such as Atomi and whatnot, then that 100% helps teachers engage in that space. And the teachers that use it well highly appreciate it and value it for what it is. We've got large numbers of staff that try to train others in and make them aware of different other ways that they can be more efficient in their workload. It's work smarter, not harder, right? So if we
Yeah,
can,
absolutely.
so if we can help teachers do that, that's going to set them up for success as well.
Yeah, well, it's what we like to hear, and it sort of, I guess, in a way, ties in a little bit to the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is kind of turning our gaze a little bit towards the future, because obviously this time has been such a unique and difficult, but also seismic in a way, time these last few months with regards to so many areas of life, but one in particular is schools and education. I know it's different situations around the world. At time of recording, I think I'm right in saying that in Australia, steps are being taken to get students back in schools, and maybe it's not too far off having things back to normal. But I wanted to ask, with regards to culture and well-being within, in particular, your school, but I guess in growing and new schools in general, how do you think that these current factors, what we've experienced just now with regards to online learning and how that has kind of exploded in its own right, how do you think that's going to affect the culture of school moving forward? Do you think we're likely to see, as soon as possible, things just return to the course that they were on exactly before? Do you think things have changed in some respects for good now, or is the answer somewhere in the middle? I know it's sort of a vague and it's sort of a difficult beast to pin down, because obviously there's so much speculation involved, but I guess just through that lens of the culture of the school, how do you see things changing as a result of everything that has been happening?
Yeah, I think that in the world of education right now, there are probably more futuristic thinkers like myself who see it as a great opportunity. And then there are others who are craving for the way things used to be. And that's a little bit of human nature, isn't it? That you have some leaders who will try to champion a way forward and then try to lead schools and school systems into a future opportunities and ways of being. And human nature for most of us is that we default to what was known, what was safe, even if we didn't really love it. Even if we had frustrations and whatnot, it's easier to default back to what we knew, even though it might not be ideal. So one of the exciting things for me when we had to look at online, it was in the world of education, everyone has an opinion, right? Because everyone went there. So every parent in the school, every person in society feels as though they've got a comment to make and have got an opinion on how schools should operate because they went there for 13 years or so. Well, no one's been there in online world, so no one had an opinion. There was no right or wrong. There was no parent going to come in and say, this is how online learning should be, because no parent had ever gone through a school of online learning. So it actually gave us permission to change and to speak into a blank canvas as to what this can be and how this can operate and how we can still see students succeed and thrive in that space. And so our schools see it as a golden opportunity to try and shape a little bit of the future in that way. I think there are enormous positives out of it. I think one of the things that is occurring that does frustrate me a little bit is people having a lot to say about how it didn't quite work at the time. Well, we need to remember that one of the reasons it didn't work is because people were in a space where they were locked inside completely. So, pardon me. They weren't even getting to go to the movies. They weren't getting to go to sport. They weren't getting to go anywhere. So they were completely locked in. So they haven't actually done online learning in a world where they could then go to football training in the afternoon or dance rehearsals at night and go out with their friends on the weekend, right? So we haven't seen online learning in that context. Online learning was also in the context where mum and dad were home full time, and they were also fearful for their jobs. They were fearful for financial reasons. They were fearful for their health, for them and their relatives. And so you've got this overwhelming sense of fear at the same time as this online learning. So we haven't seen online learning in a situation where the world is calm, where there is a degree of peace and certainty, and we can learn in this different way in this different forum. And so I think that there needs to be a little bit more robust discussion around that you can't say it did work and didn't work when the world around it was just so tumultuous and uncertain, and everyone was just looking often for a Band-Aid approach to get us through this, what was hopefully going to be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, so we can then quickly get back. So I'll say that about online learning, but what we've discovered out of it is that a large number of students appreciated being able to learn at their own pace. There are some students who sit there and listen to the teacher talk for periods on end, or there's some students who sit there and by the end of a period, the teacher's expecting, this much, when actually in reality, they're probably more capable of getting through a lot more work if they can get going at their own pace. And so the students who appreciated that. There was also a lot of students who appreciated being able to rewind a screencast and pause it and go back, and do that 3 times. Now I've got it. Now I can go on. Whereas they sit in class and the teacher keeps moving forward, and meanwhile they lost them back at minute 5. So a lot of students did reflect on being able to learn at their own pace was good, and without the distractions around them was really pleasing. And so I think there's a number of elements of that which was good. Students being able to have a little bit more choice over what subject they did when, albeit within the context of our online learning. We didn't do a 6-period day like everyone else's, like happens normally during a school day. So that meant they could choose what they did at the start of the day or the end of the day, and students appreciated that. So we're trying to find a way that we can actually harness the best out of all of that. And I think the other thing in there is that we tell kids what their timetable is. We tell them what to wear. We tell them where to line up. We often have a seating plan in a classroom, so we're now going to tell them where to sit. We tell them what activities to do. And then we turn around as educators and complain that the kids didn't show any ownership or take any responsibility for their learning. Well, they had nothing to own. The teacher dictated every single aspect of the entire thing. So why don't we break the day up a little bit where students actually have some choice, where there's 2 or 3 periods regularly where the students actually get to be self-directed learning. Learning's online. There's activities and courses, things that you can do, and engage with it online, and know that there are teachers in and around that you can call upon if you need assistance in that way. But at the time, choose. If you want to continue on with your maths from that morning, great. If you've got something you're heading to in that afternoon, you want to get ahead of it, great. But we do expect a lot from our kids. We expect them to move from thinking mathematically straight into thinking English-wise, to thinking straight into thinking creatively in an art lesson, and we expect them to be able to jump from this to this. And I think the online option gives kids a little bit more say in what they do, how they do it, and at what pace. So I think that there's some exciting opportunities there in the world of education.
Yeah, well, it's really encouraging to hear from yourself as someone who is a school leader, who is taking from this situation, which, you talked about the context of fear that surrounded it. It'd be very easy to correlate those two things and just write off everything that happened within it and said, God, wasn't that terrible? Thank God we can forget about all that now. But it's really encouraging to hear that, already you're drawing these kind of these new strategies and lessons that can be taken from it and actualized. I guess just lastly would you consider yourself hopeful to seeing that across the board within other schools as well, or more fearful? Where do you think you land with regards to that?
I would hope that we would all look for opportunities to keep moving forward and to use an aspect of online learning, like a blended learning approach moving forward. I would be very hopeful and optimistic, and I know that there's a number of schools that I work with that you tend to align yourself with similar-minded people, and so that's what I'm hoping for, an exciting future ahead for education, because we now have the opportunity. People have been forced to change. People have been forced to adapt. And so as a leader, I think there's some momentum there that we can keep moving in that way. Whereas if we say, okay, let's just go back to how we used to do things for the rest of the year, and then next year we try to reintroduce something, I think we're going to find it a lot harder than the change momentum that is already existing. And so therefore, we're now actually making adjustments on as we continue to adjust to a new world that we live in. And I think it's exciting, and I think it takes some bold, courageous leaders to be at the front of that, and to work it out, and to take people on an exciting journey forward.
Yeah, well, Darren, it does not surprise me at all that you're hopeful based off our conversation. It's certainly true to form and very encouraging, and exactly what we want to hear. With regards to our central conversation, that's probably all we have time for. But before I let you go, as our regular listeners will know, we always like to, we've got a guest on, just finish up by getting a little fun. Maybe it's a little anecdote from your years in education. It could be a little piece of advice for teachers out there, something you've gleaned over the years. can be more serious if you prefer. It doesn't necessarily have to be all that lighthearted, but we just like to think of it as your hot tip. So, Darren, you're looking a little bit sketchy there. I fear that maybe nothing's coming to mind straight away, but it can be anything. It can be whatever pops off the top of your head.
Yeah, my mind is racing.
You're drawing a blank.
My mind is racing with possibilities, right? When you have adult ADD, there's just so many trying to go through my head. I'm trying to pick out which is the right one to share in that space.
Too many good options. Yeah.
I think just enjoy what we do. The culture I go for at school is playful but professional. Let's enjoy life, enjoy each other's company, laugh at ourselves, laugh at each other, laugh at some of the funny things kids say and do, but don't mistake that from actually wanting to be the best of who we are and best of what we're trying to achieve. So playful but professional is the culture that we try to adapt at our school.
Playful but professional. I like it. It's short, snappy, it's to the point, and it's a very positive message, I guess, to end our episode on. So Darren, thank you so much for coming on, for talking to us, for sharing your wisdom with us. I wish you all the best with the slow return, well, not quite return to normal, but a return to the new normal within your school. To everybody listening, thanks for tuning in. If you want to catch any other episodes, you can find them on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you want to check us out, you can find us at our main site at getatomy.com. For now, it's going to be goodbye from Darren.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening, Simon. Thank you for hosting me. Really appreciate it.
That's the feeling is mutual. And goodbye from me. See ya.